Hey everyone, welcome back to the next segment of the First Gen Psychologist. I'm Dr. Lisette. I'm the First Gen Psychologist. I am a licensed psychologist, coach, speaker, writer, and today I'm your host. So let me tell you a little bit more about this series. So in this series, we will be covering topics that destigmatize mental health, as well as topics for personal development and empowerment centered on the First Gen experience. Today, we will be talking about Brainspotting. And the official title of our talk today is Beyond Talk Therapy, Exploring Brainspotting as a Holistic Approach to Mental Health Treatment. And we will be learning more about this from Nancy Diaz, who's an MSW, and she's a therapist for women of color who are daughters of immigrants. And so let me share a little bit more about her. So Nancy Diaz is a trauma-informed therapist who specializes in working with women of color who are daughters of immigrants. Nancy has a master's degree in social work and started a virtual private practice 3 years ago where she helps daughters of immigrants from all over the world and from all different cultural backgrounds. Nancy is originally from Phoenix and the daughter of Mexican immigrants. She currently is living in Sydney, Australia. Nancy enjoys traveling and learning from other cultures, which is why she became a digital nomad, so she could travel the world while working and still continue to help others heal. And so I love that mission, and I'm so happy to have you here, Nancy. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited when you announced that you were going to do this series. I said, oh my God, I hope that I get to be on. I know that with the time difference, it can be tricky. So thank you so much for accommodating and allowing me to be here. Yes, I'm joining from the other side of the world, but I'm always so happy to be invited to these things and be part of this.
Yes. And it's such a special, I think, way to connect. I find is building these relationships through these kinds of experiences, through these segments, or through. I know you have a podcast, and I'm sure we'll hear about it a little bit more later. But it's for me, it's the community building that's so special, and it's my favorite part. I get to connect with so many folks
Same
all
here.
over, right? And
Yes.
and
My
you're
favorite part.
you're are you currently in Sydney? I know you were also traveling before. So is Sydney your current location?
Yes, I
Okay.
just traveled around Thailand and then New Zealand and Western Australia, and but yes, now I'm back in Sydney,
Home
and
base.
yes, so this is a bit of a home base at the moment. Yes, so yeah, happy to be back after a bit of fast traveling, but
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. We always need to recharge a little bit after having too much fun, right? so,
exactly, exactly.
so therapists need self-care and balance, and so we can better provide services to you all. So let's just talk a little bit about one of Nancy's specialties, which is brain spotting. So I want to learn more from you, Nancy, because this is also really new to me. So what is brain spotting? And let's talk about how different it is from traditional talk therapy.
Oh, yes, there's so many differences. I think that brain spotting is one of those really special kind of modalities that, and by the way, for those of you who are listening, you don't know what a modality is. So therapists, we're all different, right? And we're all trained in these different techniques and approaches that allow us to help you in different ways with whatever problems you might be struggling with. So brain spotting is a modality that is a somatic type of approach, right? And so what that means is that there's a mind and body kind of connection, right? And so that's, I think, why I was drawn to brain spotting so much in the beginning, is because, you might have already read The Body Keeps the Score. You might have already heard people talk about trauma being stored in the body. And so I'm a big believer in that. Yes, trauma is stored in our body, especially when we look at, us as daughters of immigrants, that generational trauma, we definitely can feel that
Yeah.
weight, right? We might not even know exactly what our parents experienced, even, moving to a new country. We might only know bits and pieces here and there, but still we feel that weight of that trauma in us, right? And that's why so often we are wanting to do everything we can to make their sacrifices worth it. And so often we're carrying their traumas and we're carrying our own traumas, right? Because we often have childhood traumas. We may have experienced racial trauma. We may have experienced other traumatic incidents in our lives. And so we get to this point where we finally start to realize, okay, I think I'm ready to get help, but I feel like I have so many traumas, so much has happened that I feel overwhelmed. Like, how can I ever tell a therapist everything that's happened to me? And is that actually what I want? Do I want to relive that everything that's happened? And I think that, at least for me, when I first went to therapy, I was like, God, I'm going to be in therapy all my life. I mean, just with everything that's happened to me, everything that's happened to my parents, there's so much to cover, right? And so what I love about brain spotting is that it's that somatic approach, right? That you can process without actually having to talk about what it is that happened to you. And that's, I think, the part that's amazing. And that's the part that I think blew me away, because I didn't think that there was a way to heal from trauma without actually talking about everything and trying to dive deep and figure out what exactly happened to me. But if you think about trauma, and you think especially about childhood trauma, there's so many things that we may not even realize happened to us, and we just know, like, I feel like there's something happened to me, like this certain thing triggers me, and I feel like it's just this activation in my body, right? and and so we may not remember the details, when it happened, how it happened, or anything like that, but we can feel that in our bodies, right? And we get activated and all of these things. And so with brain spotting, we just look at where that is stored, where that trauma is stored in our body, right? And so what we know about trauma is that it presents in different ways, right? And so daughters of immigrants actually have higher rates of depression and of anxiety. And I think that a lot of it has to do with this generational trauma, right? And a lot of it is because our parents have suffered this immigration trauma when they've come to a new country. And so we're holding on to that. And so with brain spotting, we identify where in the body we're holding that trauma, right? And they, like I said, we have all kinds of different traumas, and they show up in different parts of our bodies. And so with brain spotting, we identify where that trauma is stored, and we use the power of the mind to actually allow ourselves to process that trauma out. And I think that it's a beautiful kind of approach, because our minds, there's so much that we do not know about the brain, about the mind, right? And so with brain spotting, it's a modality that really focuses on just allowing that uncertainty and that level of we don't know to exist. And yeah, because I think that as therapists, in grad school, like, I was always taught, like, you have to be this blank slate, and you have to be this expert, and you have to present yourself a certain way, and you have to have the answers, right? And I think that's a lot of pressure for us as therapists, because we don't always have the answers. And it's not about us giving advice or anything like that, of course, but even when we're just holding space, oftentimes it can feel like we're not doing enough. And with brain spotting, I love that the theory behind it is that we just allow you to find those answers within, right? Because you have the tools, the resources, it's all inside of you. And so once you can identify where that trauma is stored, you can start to process the memories, the sensations, the feelings, all of that. And on your own, it's about allowing yourself that space, right? To just, and allowing yourself that permission to feel, and to just, because no one ever does that for us, right? Especially if you're the eldest daughter, I think. But I think in general, for daughters of immigrants, what I've seen is that we have often been parentified, and we often have to take care of everyone else except for ourselves. And so with brain spotting, I think for a lot of my clients, it can be a little bit uncomfortable at first, because it's the first time, and this goes just for therapy in general, it's the first time where someone is actually holding space for you, and it's all about you, and it's all about how can we take care of you and help you, right? But with brain spotting, it's more of the therapist taking a step back and allowing you and your process to go wherever it needs to go, right? So in a brain spotting session, I remind the client, just invite curiosity and awareness, but allow your mind to go where it needs to go and
Yeah.
allow your body that permission to do whatever it needs to do. So brain spotting sessions can look very different from client to client. And I
Yeah.
think the clients that can become very in tune with their bodies and really
Mhm.
give their bodies that permission to do what they need to do, it can look all kinds of different ways. You might release through shaking, you might release through
Mhm.
like stretching, you might, I had one client and she was doing a lot of like head shaking. And
Oh,
by the end of it, it was just, she said that it was just incredible that she was able to process in such a different way. And she did
yeah.
brain spotting sessions a few times before that. And she said that other times she hadn't been able to have that release.
Yeah.
So it's totally different, I think, than
Yeah.
traditional talk therapy where you're expected to just process on a cognitive level. With brain spotting, you're processing using a completely different part of the brain called the subcortical region. And
Yeah.
so actually with brain spotting, what we as brain spotting practitioners are trained to do is not to talk throughout the process, right? Because
Mhm.
when we talk to the client, we are taking them back to that
That's
cognitive process.
cognitive.
And if I ask a question like how are you feeling or what are you thinking or what's coming up for you, you all of a sudden have to come back and think
Mhm.
about how to answer. And so what we
Mhm.
do is we just provide that safe space and we hold that space for you to actually
Mhm.
process, right? And I think that that is so powerful to actually feel like you're being held, like it's a really
Mhm.
safe space, and just to set aside that time for you to actually work on whatever issue it is, right? So the
Yeah.
studies have shown us that brain spotting can be really helpful with things like ADHD and anxiety. So I'm a trauma therapist, so I think that these things are just symptoms of trauma, right? But if you do struggle with things like ADHD or anxiety or anything else, right? Then brain spotting could be something that you might want to try as well, especially if you've maybe been trying traditional talk therapy and it hasn't been working for you as well, or
Mhm.
you haven't tried therapy yet, but you're a little bit nervous about, disclosing all of these
Yeah.
things. With brain spotting, you don't really need to disclose anything. So for some
Yeah.
people, and I always say it's about allowing your body to do what it needs to do. And
Mhm.
that also includes talking or not talking. Some of my clients, they in some sessions and some brain spotting sessions, they will talk almost the entire time. And you can kind of see like, wow, they're
Mhm.
processing on a different
Yeah.
level, but there's needing to talk, right? And that's great because so many times we don't have voices as daughters of
Mhm.
immigrants, right? We
Yeah.
have to hold space for our parents, right?
Mhm.
Who often are struggling with a lot of different things. And so
Yeah.
we have to quiet ourselves. And so I
Mhm.
think to be able to talk and process that way in a brain spotting session, if that's what your body is telling you you need to do, then great.
Mhm.
And other times, I think there's so much happening in a brain spotting session that you might be getting different sensations and different memories. You might be hearing, voices of your ancestors, of your mom telling you something that it's just all too much. And so maybe you just process quietly, right? And so some
Mhm.
clients might not talk for the entire brain spotting session, or they might just talk here and there when they make a realization, right? Like, oh,
Mhm.
wow, I realize this is connected to that, or, and
Yeah.
so, but it's about allowing yourself that permission to
Mhm.
really just go wherever it needs to go. And I
Yeah.
think, yeah, without getting too much into the science of why brain spotting works, what I love about it most is that it is a completely natural kind of approach. And it really
Mhm.
just is, there's no way to kind of do it incorrectly, right?
Mhm.
And really, the founder of Brain Spotting says all the time that he discovered this, while doing EMDR with another patient, realizing that the patient found this particular spot that they just kept staring at, and that's where they were able to do some serious processing and uncover this hidden trauma, right, that they
Yeah.
had, and actually process through that. So it's
Mhm.
yeah, it's just completely natural. And so you can brain spot, sometimes clients they brain
Mhm.
spot with their eyes closed, sometimes with their eyes open, sometimes they're continually looking at this brain spot, and
Yeah.
sometimes their eyes are wandering and the brain spot changes, right?
Okay.
So the brain spot, we find it using a pointer, right? So a
Okay.
brain spot practitioner will have a pointer,
Mhm.
and what we do is we help them identify where the activation is in their bodies.
Okay.
And then after that, we actually look at, okay, what's the activation level on a scale of 1 to 10, right? To kind of have a starting point. And by the end of the brain spotting session, we check in again. We might check in again and see, has that activation level lowered? Has it stayed the same? Has it gotten higher? But it's all about finding that brain spot, right? And so you might find that brain spot with the help of your brain spotting practitioner or therapist, and by just putting the pointer in different directions, right? And they'll guide you through this, and they'll tell you exactly like, okay, so now that I put the pointer there, are you noticing something else? And you'll notice that where you look affects how you feel, right? And this is something that since I was a little kid, I thought that I was so weird, because I noticed, I think I was maybe like in high school when I started really noticing that this would happen more often, that sometimes my gaze would feel just really comfortable staring at a particular location. And it wasn't at all like my eyes weren't very focused at all. It wasn't at all about the object or person or group of people that I was staring at. It was always really awkward when my gaze felt really comfortable on a group of people, because they might think that I was staring at them. But it's really that my gaze felt really comfortable there, and I was processing something entirely different. And I always just thought that this was like a weird thing that happened to me, and there was no rhyme or rhythm to it. But with brain spotting, what we know is that, yeah, you look at a certain direction and you feel completely different than if you look at something else, right? So we might start with, what do you notice when you look to the left, to the right, when you look at this particular spot? And you might notice like, okay, so you bring up an issue, right, with your brain spotting practitioner. And you say, okay, I want to work on my perfectionism, for example, or something. You look to the left and you might think, oh, I'm just remembering, how my mom would always tell me that I have to get good grades and blah, blah. And then I ask you to look at the pointer when I have it in the middle. And you might say, oh, well, now I'm hearing, my teachers saying that I don't need to try any harder. And so it might be different memories, or it might be different sensations. Like sometimes it's just, oh, now when I look over here, I just feel like this, like my heart is beating faster, or I might feel like all of a sudden I've got back pain. It's all connected. So once you start to realize that all of this is connected, right? And so what we as brain spotting practitioners are also looking at is we're looking for those signs in your body, right? And we do this even with telehealth, even on screen. So I might say, okay, I notice that your eyes are blinking faster when you look there. I might notice that you scratched your nose when you looked there. I might notice that you had an itch over here. Like so I just say, like, let's explore that. Like, let's see what that's trying to tell you. Our bodies are always trying to tell us something. But I think as daughters of immigrants, we just are not very good at tuning in and listening to our bodies, because we've never had the time or given ourselves the permission to do that. And so it's about, learning to be present, mindful, and just allow the process to go where it needs to go.
Yes. No, I thank you. Thank you. That was such a comprehensive overview of brain spotting. I was like, oh, this is so much information. I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to and learn. And so in the way that I understand it, when I was trying to differentiate it fully from like talk therapy, like you talked about that mind-body connection, but in brain spotting, it sounds like we're communicating our healing with our body and our brain, and with talk therapy, it's that cognitive component, right?
Yes.
And so, yes, are we thinking cognitively to an extent as we make these connections? Yes, but you're not analyzing it in the way that you would in talk therapy. You're not analyzing, why do I do this? You're feeling where do I feel the why, right? Is that it's very rough summary?
Yes.
I'm trying to understand.
I think I think that you are kind of right on the money. I think that it can be really hard to turn off our analytical brains and to stop over analyzing and trying to find the why, and just allow the process to take us where it needs to go. But I think that it is really important. But I think I also recognize that, and I'm kind of the same way as well, right? I have my own therapist, and I do brain spotting with her sometimes, and sometimes we do traditional talk therapy, right? And I think that, yeah, as daughters of immigrants, we do want to understand the why and all of these things, and we want to use our analytical brain sometimes and connect the dots, using our cognitive processing. And that's okay. So for me, what I do with a lot of my clients is that some sessions we do traditional talk therapy. Other sessions they might say, hey, I feel like doing some brain spotting today. Or sometimes we do half of the session in the beginning. We'll start with some brain spotting, especially some of my clients, they'll know, like, I've had a very stressful week. I've had a lot of anxiety. I just need to regulate. Can we start with some brain spotting and just do a short one? And then I want to talk and process, like, at the end as well. So we might do half and half, or we might just do 10 minutes of brain spotting, right? Because that's I think the beauty of it is that it also helps us regulate so much, because it's just like yoga or meditation, right? It's about being present in the moment. Yeah. And just stilling ourselves, because I think that oftentimes we're just go all the time, and we tend to be overachievers, I think, always, and we tend to just be nonstop. And so I think that when we actually sit down, do some brain spotting, it can help us so much. But yeah, I think that you're 100% right, that sometimes it's that mind-body connection that we need.
Yeah, no, I love it. As you're saying that, it's like, yeah, it's a reminder of, like, we just have to slow down sometimes. And so, like, brain spotting as an intervention, just generally, if I think about it as a practitioner, that's the whole purpose and intention behind it. It's teaching you how to slow down and how to listen and how to have increased awareness of what's happening for you, right? Because I'm sure that pain that I feel in my shoulders is not always necessarily related to the tense, like, that posture, right? Like, I'm sure it's in my mind that I think about it, because it's like, well, I don't feel it as much when I'm more relaxed. I feel it more when I'm stressed, right? And so I don't know. Maybe I should try brain spotting. Like, I talk to my therapist and be like, "Are you trained in this? If not, can I do this in separate?" But
Yep.
But
And you can definitely seek out, like, even if you already have a therapist, like my therapist is actually not trained in brain spotting. But because I am trained in brain spotting, what I also love about brain spotting, if you're a therapist and you happen to be listening, is that it's not territorial. It's not like you're trained in this one modality, you can only use this one and you can't partner it up with others. So brain spotting, you can actually combine with EMDR and use both them together. You can also combine it with IFS, with internal family systems, which is a different one, right? You can use others, like it's just about honoring the process and honoring that we don't know everything, and it's an experiment. But if we have other tools that we know have been helpful for our clients, then why not bring that in? So I bring in parts work sometimes when I do the brain spotting, right? And so especially, if I'm helping a client and it's about, talking to their inner child, then I might bring that up, right? Or talking to that angry part of themselves, but bringing that in, personifying that for them, so that they can say, okay, let's take a step back and let's just talk to that part that really needs us to hold them, or just to say nice, gentle words to them because they didn't hear that when they were growing up, or things like that. So I think that's one thing that I love as well. And so I have my own therapist, but I also do brain spotting with other therapists as well whenever I need that. So I do love that. There's no competition. You can do both. And if you're a therapist, you can combine. If you're a client, you can go to a brain spotting therapist for brain spotting, and you can go to another therapist for that talk therapy if you already have that relationship and that rapport and you want to keep going with them. That's what I've been doing. I find that it works well for me. But yeah, I do kind of love that. And my therapist is all for it. She's like, yeah, I love that you're doing brain spotting, like, outside of our sessions. I'm like, yeah, I think it both are helpful, so.
Yeah, I deeply appreciate the examples that you have given throughout our whole talk today, just in terms of, because I talk about destigmatizing mental health. I also talk about demystifying the therapy process as a big portion of destigmatizing mental health, and just being able to break it down. So for all of you who have been listening today, watching this later, share it with someone, learning more about what that experience can be like in the room. But because I think that's, if I think of the most frequently asked question I receive about just therapy is like, what can I expect? And so, but that's a whole other conversation for us to have. And so we are at time now. So I wanted to just transition into learning more about how we can support you and your work.
Yeah, of course. So if you're interested in working with me, I am accepting clients at the moment. You can find me at globalcitizentherapy.com and book a consultation call with me. If you're a therapist and you're interested in learning more about brain spotting, I am running a workshop called Brain Spotting and Racial Trauma. Because of my specialty in working with women of color who are daughters of immigrants, what I've realized is that a lot of my clients come to me with issues of overt racism or microaggressions, all of this leading to this racial trauma. And so I've decided to start this workshop for those therapists who are interested in maybe learning a bit more about brain spotting. They're not sure if they want to commit fully to the 3-day training of brain spotting, but they also want to learn how to support clients and seeing how brain spotting can help with people who have racial trauma. Then this is a workshop that you should definitely sign up for. It's in a month, and you can find out about that workshop. I'll be posting and sharing about it probably later today. I'll be sharing it on social media. So you can find me under the handles at Global Citizen Therapy on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on TikTok, all those. Yes.
You can see them there.
Come on, all of them.
Yes, all of them. And is this a workshop that you will do on a recurring capacity, you think, or is this a one-time workshop?
This is the second one that I'm going to be running, and I'm running it, and it's back because of popular demand. There were a lot of people asking if I would host another one, and I haven't had the time since I've been traveling the past 2 months, but next month I'll have the time. So I just put that up. I'm going to be sharing it on socials probably today. So yes, if you're interested, it is a limited capacity. This type of workshop works better when we pair off. So it is just going to be a limited capacity. So yes, if you're interested, you can find out more about that. So make sure that you follow me on social media. I'll also be talking a bit more about brain spotting on my podcast. It's just called the Global Citizen Therapy Podcast, and it's a podcast on mental health for women of color who are daughters of immigrants. So I'll be talking a bit more about brain spotting in the future episode as well. So make sure that you follow and download on your favorite podcast listening platform.
Yes, all of it. So please make sure you're following at Global Citizen Therapy. Check out Nancy's website, and so you can learn more about brain spotting and all the other amazing things that she does. And so thank you again so much, Nancy, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and taking the time out of your day to learn something new with me.
Yes, thank you so much. Bye.